The boardroom exploded with laughter when CEO Ava Liang held up the German contract and said, "Translate this perfectly, and my entire quarterly salary is yours, $400,000. They thought it was a joke. The executives grinned, the consultants chuckled, and in the corner near the coffee station, a janitor named Ethan Morales gripped his mop handle so hard his knuckles turned white. He knew every word on that page, every trap, every lie. What happened next didn't just save a billion-dollar company, it rewrote the rules of who gets to be a hero. Want to see how this invisible man brought an empire to its knees? Stay until the end and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The fluorescent lights on the 41st floor of Helix Core Biogen hummed their usual monotonous song, a sound Ethan Morales had grown so accustomed to that he barely heard it anymore. It was 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, the kind of gray Seattle afternoon where the rain wasn't falling so much as hovering suspended in the air like the city itself couldn't decide whether to cry or hold it together. Ethan pushed his cleaning cart past the executive conference room, the wheels squeaking in that rhythmic way that announced his presence without him having to say a word. Invisible, he thought not for the first time. That's what he'd become over the past 3 years. Not invisible like a ghost. Ghosts were noticed, feared, remembered. No, Ethan was invisible like air. Essential, maybe, but only when you couldn't breathe. The door to conference room B was propped open. He could hear voices inside, the kind of confident, caffeine-fueled energy that came from people who'd never had to choose between paying rent and buying their kid new shoes. "This is ridiculous," someone was saying. It sounded like Gordon. No, they'd renamed him recently in his head. Galen Hart, the CFO, with the silver fox hair and the Rolex that cost more than Ethan's car. "We're supposed to just trust their translation services. This is a 9-figure deal, Ava. We need certainty." Ethan slowed his cart. He wasn't supposed to eavesdrop. Rule number 3 in the Janitor's Handbook of Staying Employed. Make yourself scarce when the executives are talking. But something in Galen's voice, that edge of desperation wrapped in expensive cologne, made him pause. "Their firm is reputable," came another voice. "Mira Trent, head of legal, all sharp edges and sharper suits. They've handled contracts for Pfizer Moderna. Reputable doesn't mean infallible." This voice was new. No, not new. Just rarely heard in these halls. Ava Liang, CEO founder, the woman whose face was on the Forbes 40 under 40 list 2 years running. She had a voice like cold water, clear, shocking, impossible to ignore. "I've seen reputable firms miss commas that cost millions." Ethan positioned himself near the coffee station, emptying an already empty trash can. Through the gap in the door, he could see them, 8 people around a mahogany table that probably cost more than his annual salary. Ava stood at the head, her black hair pulled back in a way that said, "I don't have time for nonsense," her eyes scanning a document like she was looking for landmines. And maybe she was. "The Munich partnership is time-sensitive," said a man Ethan didn't recognize. Expensive suit, that particular shade of confidence that came from never being told no. Later, Ethan would learn his name, Bryce Kincaid, Executive Vice President of Partnerships, and the kind of snake that wore human skin so well, you didn't see the scales until it was too late. "We have a signing ceremony scheduled for next Friday. 7 days. The press is already circling. If we delay it, signals weakness. If we sign something we don't fully understand, it signals stupidity," Ava shot back. The room went quiet. Ethan recognized that silence. It was the same one that fell over Luna's parent-teacher conferences when her teacher suggested she was too quiet and maybe needed to participate more. The silence of people who wanted to argue but didn't quite dare. Ava lifted the document, thick-bound, threatening in its complexity. Even from 15 feet away, Ethan could see the German text, dense and angular like a wall of thorns. "This section here," she said, tapping a page. "Paragraph 14, subsection C. Their translator says it's a standard data-sharing protocol, but Datenübertragung can mean a dozen different things depending on context. Transfer, transmission, relay, each has different legal implications under GDPR and the CCPA. Galen shifted in his seat. "So what do you propose?" "We hire another translator that'll take weeks." "No." Ava set the document down, and something flickered across her face. Not quite a smile, more like a challenge accepting itself. "I propose something more interesting." She picked up the document again, held it high enough for everyone to see. "Here's my offer," she said, and now there was definitely something dangerous in her voice, something that made Ethan's hand tighten on the trash bag he was pretending to change. "Anyone in this company, and I mean anyone who can translate this document perfectly, catching every legal nuance, every contextual landmine, every piece of regulatory doublespeak, I will give them my entire quarterly salary." The room erupted. "Ava, that's $400,000. You can't be serious." "Oh, I'm completely serious," Ava said, and now she was smiling the kind of smile that said she knew exactly what she was doing. "Post it on the company intranet. Email it to every department. Hell, print it out and tape it to the bathroom stalls. I want every person who works in this building to see this challenge." Bryce leaned back in his chair, that snake smile playing at his lips. "Ava, with all due respect, this is a publicity stunt. No, Bryce, with all due respect, this is me putting my money where my mouth is." She set the document on the table with a finality that sounded like a gavel. "I've spent 3 years building this company on the principle that talent exists everywhere, not just in corner offices. If someone on our janitorial staff can read German contract law better than a $1,000 an hour firm, I want to know. And I want to pay them for it." The laughter started small. A chuckle from someone at the far end of the table. Then another. Then it rolled through the room like a wave gathering force crashing against the shores of Ava's earnest challenge until it drowned it completely. "The janitors," someone wheezed. "Oh my God, she's serious." "Hey, maybe the cleaning lady did a semester abroad," another voice chimed in, dripping with sarcasm. Even Mira was hiding a smile behind her hand. Only Ava wasn't laughing. She stood there, document in hand, and something in her eyes went hard. "Fine, laugh, but the offer stands. $400,000, open to everyone. 48 hours. She dropped the document on the table and walked out. The laughter continued for another 30 seconds. Then, like all laughter from people with actual work to do, it died, and they moved on. Ethan stood frozen by the coffee station. His hand, still gripping the trash bag, had gone completely numb. He could feel his heart doing something complicated in his chest, a rhythm that was part remembered pride and part current shame. They were laughing about janitors, about cleaning ladies, about people like him. "People like you," his brain corrected. "People who are you." Someone brushed past him on their way out. Didn't say excuse me, didn't even glance his way, just moved around him like he was furniture. The conference room emptied. Ethan waited until he was sure they were gone, then stepped inside. The document lay on the table where Ava had left it, pages slightly scattered from her dramatic exit. Ethan approached it the way someone might approach a bomb, carefully knowing it could explode. Partnerschaftsvertrag zwischen Helix Core Biogen und München, Genetische Forschung GmbH. Partnership, agreement between Helix Core Biogen and Munich Genetic Research. His hands didn't shake when he reached for it. That surprised him. 3 years of pushing mops, of being invisible, of letting the part of his brain that knew things like Rechtssprache and Vertragsauslegung go dusty and dark. He'd expected that part of him to be dead, but touching the document felt like touching a live wire. The door opened behind him. Ethan spun document in hand and found himself face to face with Ava Liang. She stopped. He stopped. For a moment they just stared at each other across the expensive carpet and the even more expensive silence. Ethan started, then stopped. What was he supposed to say? Sorry, I know I'm just the janitor, but I used to be someone who could read this. Ava's eyes dropped to the document in his hands, then back to his face. Her expression was unreadable, but something flickered there. Curiosity, suspicion. He couldn't tell. The challenge is real, she said quietly. If you're interested. Then she walked past him and out the door, leaving only the faint scent of coffee and something sharp ambition maybe, or just expensive perfume. Ethan stood alone in the conference room, document in hand, heart hammering. He looked down at the German text. His eyes, trained by years of academic rigor he'd thought he'd left behind, immediately caught the structure. 3-part conditional clause in paragraph 2. Nested subjunctives in paragraph 7. And there, in paragraph 14, the one Ava had questioned, something that made his stomach drop. Datenübertragung didn't just mean data transfer in this context. It meant surrender. The bus ride home took 47 minutes and 3 transfers. Ethan sat in the back, the document he'd gone back for it after his shift found it still on the table. Like a test he couldn't stop himself from taking, hidden in his backpack between a thermos and Luna's half-finished watercolor set. Rain streaked the windows. Outside, Seattle blurred past coffee shops, closing tech workers hurrying toward their Tesla's homeless camps, blooming under overpasses like urban mushrooms, the city of the future, everyone called it. But futures, Ethan had learned, were expensive, and some people only got to watch them happen to other people. He pulled out his phone. 6:47 p.m. Luna would be worried. She always worried when he was late, ever since that month 2 years ago, when his car broke down, and he'd had to walk 5 miles home, and she'd called 911 because she thought something terrible had happened. On my way home, sunshine, he texted. Pizza night. Your choice of toppings. The reply came back immediately, pineapple and olives. Despite everything, Ethan smiled. You're a monster. I love you. Love you more, Dad. He put the phone away and closed his eyes. The bus rattled on, and behind his eyelids he could see the document. Not the physical pages, but the meaning of the pages. The architecture of the language. He'd been a professor once. Dr. Ethan Morales, University of Washington, Department of Applied Linguistics, with a specialization in multilingual risk assessment. It was a mouthful of a title for a relatively simple concept. He'd studied how language fails in high-stakes situations, how a misplaced comma in a contract could cost millions, how a subtle shift in verb tense in a diplomatic agreement could start wars. He'd been good at it. Published papers, got grant funding, had graduate students who actually listened when he talked. Then Maria got sick. Ovarian cancer. Stage 4. The kind of diagnosis that arrived like a bullet and kept firing for 2 years. They'd had insurance, good insurance through the university, but insurance was a finite shield against an infinite darkness. Experimental treatments, out-of-network specialists, the kind of care that came with price tags that had commas in them. He'd burned through savings, mortgaged the house. Then the house itself sold to pay for the treatment that might give them another year. It gave them 6 months. Luna was 9 when her mother died. Ethan was 37 and already a ghost hollowed out by grief and debt, and the specific kind of exhaustion that comes from watching someone you love disappear in increments. He'd tried to keep teaching. Lasted a semester. The words that had once come so easily, the lectures on pragmatic failure, the seminars on cross-linguistic ambiguity, turned to ash in his mouth. His students deserved better. Luna deserved better. So he'd quit. Quietly. No dramatic exit. Just a letter of resignation and a recommendation that they hire someone younger, someone who still believed language could save things. The janitorial position at Helix Corps had been listed on Craigslist. Immediate start. Benefits after 90 days. He'd been hired on the spot. Nobody asked about his PhD. Nobody cared that he could read legal contracts in 5 languages. They needed someone to mop floors and empty trash cans and be invisible. He'd been invisible ever since. The bus stopped. His stop. Ethan gathered his backpack and stepped out into the drizzle. Their apartment was in a complex that had been up and coming 20 years ago and was now just coming apart. But it was home. Luna had painted a watercolor of the building and hung it by the door, all crooked lines and too bright colors, the way a 12-year-old saw the world. He unlocked the door. "I'm home." Luna appeared from her room sketchbook in hand pencil behind her ear. She'd inherited her mother's eyes, dark, thoughtful, older than they should be, and Ethan's stubbornness, though she called it artistic integrity. "Pineapple and olives," she said seriously. "I'm not backing down." "You're brave. Misguided, but brave." He dropped his backpack, trying to ignore the weight of the document inside it. "How was school?" Something flickered across her face. Quick. She was good at hiding things, his daughter. She'd learned it from him. "Fine," she said. "Luna?" "Dad." They stared at each other. This too was a language, the one parents and children spoke when words weren't enough. "There's this boy," she finally said. "Tyler, he's in 8th grade." Ethan felt something cold settle in his stomach. "What about him? He said something today, at lunch." She was looking down now, studying her sketchbook like it held answers. "He said people who work janitorial jobs are too stupid to do anything else. That they're failures." The cold thing in Ethan's stomach turned hot. "He was talking about his uncle or something," Luna continued quickly. "He wasn't talking about you specifically, but everyone knows you work at Helix Corps as a janitor, and some of the other kids laughed, and I just—" She looked up, and her eyes were bright with tears she refused to let fall. "I wanted to tell them. About your PhD, about how you used to teach, about how you speak 5 languages, but I know we don't talk about that, so I didn't. But Dad, it's not fair." "Hey." Ethan crossed the small living room and pulled her into a hug. She was getting tall. Soon she'd be taller than him. Soon she'd be leaving for college for a life he was working 2 jobs to make possible. "You know why I don't talk about the PhD?" She shook her head against his chest. "Because it doesn't matter," he said quietly. "Not really. What matters is keeping a roof over our heads. What matters is making sure you get to draw and dream, and not worry about medical bills, or whether we can afford groceries. What matters is being here, being your dad." "But you were someone," Luna said, her voice muffled. "You were Dr. Morales." "I still am someone." He pulled back, tilted her chin up so she had to meet his eyes. "I'm your father. And that Tyler kid, he's wrong. There's dignity in all work. There's intelligence in knowing what matters and doing what needs to be done. You understand?" She nodded, but he could see the doubt lingering. 12 years old, and already the world was teaching her that worth came with titles and paychecks. "I tell you what," Ethan said, making a decision he wasn't sure about but felt necessary. "Tomorrow when I pick you up from school, I'm going to teach you something, a German phrase, and you can use it on Tyler if he says anything else." Luna's eyes lit up. "Really? What does it mean?" "You'll find out tomorrow." He ruffled her hair. "Now, about this pineapple and olive situation." They ordered pizza. Luna got her abomination of toppings. Ethan got something reasonable. They ate while watching a documentary about marine biology that Luna was using as reference for a painting. She fell asleep on the couch around 9:30, and he carried her to her room the way he had when she was little, when the weight of her in his arms was the only thing that made sense in the world. Then he went back to the living room, turned on the desk lamp, and pulled out the document. The apartment was quiet, except for the rain against the windows and the hum of the refrigerator. Ethan spread the pages across the coffee table, 47 pages of dense legal German formatted in that particular way that European contracts favored nested clauses, conditional statements, references to other sections that referenced other sections in an infinite loop of legalese. He hadn't done this in 3 years, hadn't let himself. It hurt too much, like flexing a muscle that had atrophied. But Luna's face flashed in his mind. "I wanted to tell them, but I know we don't talk about that." His hands moved before his brain could stop them. He found a pen, started making notes in the margins. The first 20 pages were standard. Partnership terms, revenue sharing, intellectual property clauses that were aggressive but not unusual for a biotech deal. Ava's team had probably flagged most of it already. But paragraph 14, section C, Ethan read it once, twice, 3 times. Then he pulled out the German-English law dictionary he'd kept from his teaching days, the one with his notes in the margins, the one that smelled like the university library and better times. Bei Datenübertragung im Rahmen dieser Partnerschaft erklärt sich Helix Core Biogen bereit, uneingeschränkten Zugriff auf sämtliche Forschungsdatenbanken zu gewähren, einschließlich genetischer Profile und klinischer Versuchsergebnisse ohne weitere Zustimmung oder Benachrichtigung. He translated it slowly, carefully, the way he'd taught his graduate students word by word, then phrase by phrase, then in full context. In the event of data transfer within the framework of this partnership, Helix Core Biogen agrees to provide unrestricted access to all research databases, including genetic profiles and clinical trial results, without further consent or notification. His pen stopped. Without further consent or notification. That wasn't a data-sharing protocol. That was a back door, a trap door. A clause designed to look like standard legal language, but functioned like a key handed to a stranger in the night. Under GDPR, under CCPA, under every data protection law enacted in the last decade, this clause was a landmine. No worse. A landmine would explode once. This clause was a fuse to an entire arsenal. Genetic profiles, clinical trial results, patient data, research that Helix Core had spent millions developing that held the identities and health information of thousands of people who'd consented to participate in studies, who'd trusted that their DNA wouldn't end up in a foreign database without their knowledge. And buried in paragraph 14, section C, in language so carefully crafted it could slip past automated compliance checks, past overworked lawyers, past everyone except someone who understood, not just German, but the intent behind the German was permission to take it all. Ethan sat back, his heart pounding. This wasn't sloppiness. This was architecture. Someone had designed this clause specifically to pass initial review while creating a legal obligation that Helix Corps couldn't back out of once signed. Once those signatures went on the final page, once the press conference happened, once the champagne was poured, it would be too late. He looked at the clock. 11:43 p.m. He looked at Luna's closed bedroom door. He thought about Tyler, the 8th grader, who thought janitors were stupid. He thought about the executives laughing at Ava's challenge. He thought about being invisible for 3 years, about choosing safety over pride, about all the reasons he'd stopped being Dr. Morales. Then he thought about Ava's eyes in the conference room, that flicker of something when she'd seen him holding the document. The challenge is real, if you're interested. Ethan pulled out his laptop, 6 years old, held together with hope and a cracked screen protector, and opened a blank document. He started writing. Not a translation. Not yet. First, a structural analysis. He documented every clause that raised flags, cross-referenced them with EU and US regulatory frameworks, mapped the language patterns, noting where the phrasing deviated from standard contract terminology in ways that created legal loopholes. At 2:30 a.m., he started the actual translation. Not a word-for-word conversion, but a legal interpretation that captured both the explicit meaning and the implicit dangers. At 4:15 a.m., he found something else. A phrase in paragraph 31 that didn't exist in standard German legal vocabulary, Datensouveränitätsübertragung. Data sovereignty transfer. It was a nonsense compound, the kind of thing that sounded official, but had no established legal definition, which meant it could mean anything. Could be interpreted any way the party with the better lawyers wanted. It was a fingerprint, a signature. Someone had made up terminology specifically for this contract, which meant someone had crafted this from scratch with malicious intent. At 5:47 a.m., as the Seattle dawn turned the sky from black to gray, Ethan finished. 43 pages of analysis. A complete translation. A forensic breakdown of every problematic clause. A summary written in language clear enough for a board of directors to understand without needing their own translator. He printed it at the library 3 blocks away, using quarters he'd been saving for laundry. The librarian, a kind woman named Patricia, who'd helped Luna with research projects, gave him a sympathetic smile. "Big project?" she asked. "Something like that," Ethan said. He put the pages in a manila envelope, wrote on the front in careful block letters, Legal Department, Confidential, Munich Contract Analysis. He didn't put his name on it. The Helix Corps building was mostly empty when he arrived at 6:30 a.m. Just security in the lobby and the skeleton crew of early bird executives who thought sleeping was for the weak. Ethan swiped his janitor's badge access to all floors, invisible to all systems, and took the elevator to the 39th floor. Legal Department. There was a drop box outside Mira Trent's office, locked secure for confidential documents. He stood there for a long moment, envelope in hand. This was the moment. The choice. Stay invisible and safe, or step into the light and risk everything. I wanted to tell them, but I know we don't talk about that. Luna's voice in his head. Ethan dropped the envelope in the box. The metal slot clanged shut with a finality that sounded like a door closing and a door opening at the same time. He turned to leave and nearly walked straight into Ava Liang. She was in running gear, a backpack over one shoulder, clearly coming from a morning workout. Her hair was in a ponytail. No makeup. She looked younger like this, and more tired, and somehow more real than the polished CEO who commanded conference rooms. They stared at each other. Ava's eyes dropped to his empty hands, then to the drop box, then back to his face. Something passed between them. Not words, not yet, Just a recognition, a seeing. "Early shift?" she asked quietly. "Couldn't sleep," Ethan said, which was true. Ava nodded slowly. "Me neither." She moved past him toward her office, but paused at the door. "You know," she said, not turning around, "I meant what I said. About the challenge, about the money, about wanting to know if talent exists everywhere." "I know," Ethan said. "Good." She disappeared into her office, and Ethan took the stairs down all 41 floors because his hands were shaking too much to trust himself in an elevator. When he got home, Luna was just waking up. She shuffled into the kitchen in her flannel pajamas, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "You're up early," she mumbled. "Couldn't sleep," he said again. "Want pancakes? With chocolate chips. Is there any other kind?" They made breakfast together. She told him about an art project she was working on, something about invisible labor, about the people who made cities run without anyone noticing. He helped her mix batter and listened and tried not to think about the envelope sitting in a locked box 39 floors above the Seattle streets waiting to be discovered. Waiting to change everything. Or nothing. He wouldn't know which until tomorrow. The morning came too fast and too slow at the same time. Ethan dropped Luna off at Pioneer Middle School at 7:52 a.m., 8 minutes before the first bell, because she liked having time to organize her locker before the hallways got crowded. She kissed his cheek. Still did that, thank God, even at 12, and disappeared into the flow of backpacks and hoodies and the particular chaos of middle school mornings. He sat in his car for 3 minutes after she left, hands on the steering wheel, wondering if he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life, or the first right choice in 3 years. His phone buzzed. Text from his supervisor. "Ramon Floor 41 needs extra attention today. Board meeting prep. THX." Ethan stared at the message. Floor 41. Legal department, where his envelope sat in a locked box, either being read right now or sitting unopened Schrodinger's career suicide. He drove to Helix Corps, with his stomach doing complicated acrobatics. The building looked the same as always, glass and steel, and that particular Seattle confidence that came from too much venture capital and not enough sleep. Ethan badged in at 8:34 a.m., nodded to Marcus at the security desk, and took the service elevator up. The 39th floor was quiet when he arrived. Too quiet. Usually by 8:45, there'd be the sounds of a law office coming to life, printers warming up coffee makers, gurgling the low hum of people preparing to spend another day turning human language into profitable contracts. But today, there was nothing except the fluorescent hum and the sound of his own cartwheels squeaking down the hallway. Ethan started his usual routine. Empty trash cans, wipe down surfaces, replace paper towels. His hands moved on autopilot while his brain spiraled through every possible outcome of what he'd done. Best case. They read it, use it, never know who sent it. Worst case, they trace it back to him somehow, fire him for overstepping, and he loses the only steady paycheck keeping Luna fed. Most likely case. They throw it away because anonymous tips from janitors aren't how billion-dollar companies make decisions. He was wiping down the coffee station when Mira Trent's office door opened. Mira stepped out, still wearing her coat, holding a coffee cup in one hand and Ethan's manila envelope in the other. Her face was doing something complicated, confusion mixed with excitement, mixed with the kind of concentration that came from encountering a puzzle you couldn't immediately solve. She didn't see him. Or maybe she did, and he was too invisible to register. She walked straight past him into the main conference room where 3 other lawyers were already gathering. Through the glass walls, Ethan watched her open the envelope, watched her pull out his analysis, watched her eyes move across the first page, then widen, then narrow, with focus. One of the other lawyers, James Ethan, had cleaned his office enough times to know his name leaned over her shoulder. "What's that?" "I don't know," Mira said, and her voice carried through the glass in a way that made Ethan freeze mid-wipe. "I found it in the drop box this morning. No name, no department code, just this." She spread the pages across the conference table. 4 lawyers crowded around like archaeologists, discovering something that shouldn't exist. Ethan's heart hammered so hard he thought it might crack his ribs. "Is this—" James picked up a page, his eyes scanning. "This is the Munich contract. Someone translated the entire thing." "Not just translated," Mira said quietly. She was on page 15 now, her finger tracing down the margin notes. "Look at this. Cross-references to GDPR Article 6, CCPA Section 1798.100. They've mapped every clause against current data protection frameworks in both jurisdictions." Another lawyer, Sarah, grabbed a different page. "Holy shit! They caught the sovereignty transfer language. I looked at this section 3 times and thought it was just standard IP protocol." "Because it's designed to look standard," Mira said, and now her voice had an edge Ethan had never heard before. Sharp. Almost afraid. "Whoever wrote this analysis, they understand legal linguistics, not just translation, the intent behind the language structure." James looked up. So someone on our team finally did the deep work. That's the thing. Mira picked up the envelope, turned it over in her hands like it might reveal secrets. "This isn't from our team. No internal routing, no digital trail, just appeared in the Dropbox sometime between last night and this morning." The room went silent. Sarah's eyes went wide. "Wait, you don't think someone actually responded to Ava's challenge?" "That was a joke," James said, but he didn't sound convinced anymore. "Was it?" Mira set the envelope down carefully. "Look at this work. This is PhD-level analysis. This is someone who speaks German fluently, understands American and European regulatory law, and has enough technical knowledge of genomic data protocols to catch implications our whole team missed." "Our whole team includes people who went to Yale Law," James said flatly. "I went to Yale Law," Mira shot back. "And I didn't catch this. None of us did." She pulled out her phone, fingers moving fast. 30 seconds later, Ethan heard the ping of a Slack notification echo from multiple laptops simultaneously. Sarah checked her phone. "Oh my God, she's posting it to the whole legal channel." "Because whatever this is," Mira said, gathering the pages like they were made of gold, "everyone needs to see it. Right now." Ethan carefully, quietly pushed his cart backward out of their sight line. His hands were shaking so badly he had to grip the handle to keep them still. It was happening. They'd found it. They were reading it, and they knew it was good. He should have felt victorious. Instead, he felt terrified. The Slack notification must have gone out company-wide because within 15 minutes, the 39th floor transformed from quiet to chaos. Lawyers emerged from offices. Paralegals clustered around computer screens. Even people from other floors started showing up, badges, swinging eyes bright with the kind of gossip that made office life bearable. Ethan kept cleaning, kept moving, kept being invisible while the world he'd shaken began to tremble. "Did you see it?" Someone whispered near the water cooler. 43 pages. Whoever did this spent serious time. Mira thinks it's someone external. A whistleblower, maybe. "No way. Has to be internal. How else would they get the original document?" Ethan wiped down a desk he'd already wiped down twice. His ears burned with the effort of listening while pretending not to. Near the elevators, 2 junior associates were practically vibrating with excitement. "I heard Ava's offering $400,000 for this," one said. That's insane. That's more than we make in 2 years. Worth it if it saves the company from a GDPR nightmare. You see, the clause about genomic database access, if we'd signed that, the EU would have fined us into bankruptcy. The elevator dinged. Galen Hart stepped out, looking like a man who'd been woken from a sound sleep by a fire alarm. His silver hair was slightly mussed. His tie wasn't quite straight. He made a beeline for Mira's office. Through the glass walls, God bless transparent, modern architecture. Ethan watched Galen's face cycle through emotions as Mira showed him the analysis. Confusion. Disbelief. Understanding. Then something that looked a lot like fear. You're telling me, Galen said, voice muffled but audible, that we were 48 hours away from signing a contract that would have given Munich complete access to our proprietary databases. Not complete access, Mira corrected. Legally mandated irreversible access under the guise of partnership data sharing. Whoever drafted this buried a trap door in paragraph 14 that would have bound us to ongoing unmonitored transfers of patient genetic data without consent protocols. Galen sat down hard in a chair. Jesus Christ. It gets worse. Mira flipped to a page covered in Ethan's careful annotations. The person who did this analysis found 7 other clauses with similar structures. Small things. A word here. A conditional phrase there. But when you stack them together, they create a framework for Munich to essentially strip mine our research while maintaining legal compliance on paper. Who found this? Galen's voice was sharp now. Executive sharp. Which firm did we hire for review? That's the thing. Mira handed him the envelope. No firm, no name, it just appeared. Galen stared at the manila envelope like it might bite him. Someone just anonymously delivered a 43-page forensic analysis of our biggest contract of the year, apparently. Why? It was the right question. The question Ethan had asked himself at 4 a.m. while translating paragraph after paragraph. Why do this? Why risk exposure? Why care? He'd thought about Luna, about Tyler calling Janitor stupid, about being invisible for so long he'd started to believe he deserved it. But watching Galen's face now, watching Mira's careful excitement, Ethan realized there was another answer, because some traps are too dangerous to let people walk into, even if warning them costs you everything. The morning bled into afternoon. Ethan's shift was supposed to end at 2 p.m., but Ramon asked him to stay late. Big meeting tomorrow, need everything perfect, so he texted Luna that he'd be late picking her up. It's okay, she texted back. Gonna work on my art project in the library. Be safe. Love you. Love you more. He was emptying trash cans on the 41st floor when he heard his name. Not Ethan, not Dr. Morales, just, hey you. He turned. David, one of the assistant facility managers, stood in the hallway with a clipboard and an expression Ethan couldn't quite read. Yeah, Ethan said. You work this floor pretty regular, right? 39th, 40th, 41st. Most days. David tapped his pen against the clipboard. You happen to see anyone unusual around here last night, late shift? Someone who doesn't normally have access to legal. Ethan's mouth went dry. No. Why? Just asking. Someone left something in one of the drop boxes. Probably nothing, but we're supposed to log any unusual activity. David's eyes were sharp. Too sharp. You sure you didn't see anyone? I was here early this morning, Ethan said carefully, keeping his voice steady. Around 6:30. Just me and security. Right. 6:30. David made a note on his clipboard. What were you doing here that early? Couldn't sleep. Figured I'd get a jump on the day. David studied him for a long moment. Ethan forced himself to meet the gaze, to not look away, to keep breathing normally. Okay, David finally said. You see anything weird, you let me know? Yeah. Sure. David walked away, and Ethan leaned against the wall, his legs suddenly unreliable. They were looking. Not hard, not yet, but looking. And if David connected the dots, janitor with early access, mysterious document appearing in early morning hours, it wouldn't take long to put together a theory. Ethan finished his shift on autopilot, barely registering the tasks. By the time he got to Luna's school, it was almost 4 p.m. The parking lot was mostly empty, just a few cars belonging to teachers staying late, and parents picking up kids from after-school programs. He found Luna in the library sketchbook, open, surrounded by torn magazine clippings and colored pencils. She looked up when he approached, and something in her face made him stop. "What happened?" he asked. "Nothing." "Luna." She closed her sketchbook. "Can we just go home?" They walked to the car in silence. Luna climbed into the passenger seat and stared out the window, jaw set in that particular way that meant she was holding something in with both hands. Ethan started the engine, but didn't pull out of the parking spot. "Talk to me, sunshine." For a long moment she didn't say anything. Then quietly, "Tyler said something again today." The hot thing from last night returned to Ethan's stomach. What did he say? He was talking to his friends at lunch, about his dad's new job at some tech company, about how his dad makes 6 figures now, and how they're buying a house in Bellevue. Luna's voice was flat, carefully controlled. And then he said, "At least my dad isn't pushing a mop for minimum wage like some people." Ethan's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "He didn't say your name," Luna continued. "But everyone knows. Everyone knows you work janitorial at Helix Corps, and some of the kids laughed, and I just—" She turned to look at him, and her eyes were bright with anger and hurt, and a kind of fierce pride that made Ethan's chest ache. "I told him." "Told him what? That you speak 5 languages, that you have a PhD, that you used to teach at the university." The words came out in a rush, tumbling over each other, like she'd been holding them back too long. "I told him you're smarter than his dad will ever be, and that you work hard because you're taking care of me, and that there's nothing shameful about honest work." Ethan felt something crack open in his chest. "He laughed," Luna said, and now her voice broke. "He said I was lying, that no one with a PhD would be working as a janitor unless they'd screwed up somehow, unless they were a failure." "Luna, and I wanted to prove it, Dad. I wanted to show him your diploma or your old papers or something, but I know we don't talk about it. I know we don't keep that stuff out, so I just—" She wiped her eyes angrily. "I just stood there while he laughed." Ethan unbuckled his seatbelt and pulled her into a hug across the center console. She was crying now, really crying the kind of tears that came from trying to defend someone you love and feeling like you failed. "Listen to me," he said into her hair. "You didn't fail. You stood up for what's true. That's not failure. That's courage." "But he didn't believe me." "Because Tyler is 12 and stupid and learning the wrong lessons about worth." Ethan pulled back, cupped her face, so she had to look at him. "You know what I did today?" Luna shook her head. "I can't tell you everything. Not yet. But I did something that used all those languages, all that education, all that knowledge that Tyler thinks doesn't matter because I wear a janitor's uniform." He smiled, and it felt true. "And if it works when it works, it's going to help a lot of people. Not because I have a fancy title, because I have the skills and I chose to use them." "Really?" Luna's eyes were wide. "Really? Can you tell me what it was?" "Soon," Ethan promised. "Soon I'll tell you everything. But for now, I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" Luna nodded against his shoulder. They drove home through Seattle traffic, and Ethan's phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it until they were parked outside their apartment. Then he checked. Unknown number. Text message. This is Ava Liang. We need to talk. Tomorrow. 7 a.m. Conference room B. Come alone. His heart stopped. Luna was already out of the car heading toward their building. Ethan sat frozen, staring at the message. She knew. Somehow she knew. He typed back with shaking fingers. How did you get this number? The reply came 30 seconds later. Employee records. I'm the CEO. I have access to everything. 7 a.m. Don't be late. Ethan looked up at their apartment window. Luna was visible through the glass, already setting up her art supplies at the kitchen table. Safe and unaware of the earthquake about to hit their lives. He texted back, I'll be there. The night crawled by. Luna made dinner boxed mac and cheese her specialty, while Ethan pretended to be fine. They ate. They watched a documentary. They talked about her art project, which was turning into something about invisible workers in cities, about the people who kept things running without recognition. It's for the school showcase next month, Luna explained, showing him her sketches. I'm doing a series. Janitors, bus drivers, cafeteria workers. People nobody really sees. Ethan's throat closed up. You okay, Dad? Luna asked. Yeah, he managed. I think it's beautiful. She went to bed at 10. Ethan sat in the dark living room watching the city lights through their window, wondering what tomorrow would bring. At midnight, he pulled out his phone and did something he hadn't done in 3 years. He Googled himself. The results were sparse. A faculty page from the University of Washington, archived and outdated. A few academic papers on multilingual risk assessment in biotech contracts. A obituary for Maria Morales that mentioned her husband, Dr. Ethan Morales, and daughter Luna. He clicked on one of his old papers. The abstract read like a foreign language, now something he'd written in another life. This study examines how linguistic ambiguity in cross-border biotech agreements creates exploitable vulnerabilities in intellectual property frameworks, with particular attention to how non-native contract drafters weaponize translation gaps to create asymmetric legal obligations. He'd written that paper 7 years ago. It had won an award. And today, he'd used every principle in it to dissect the Munich contract. Ethan closed his laptop and went to bed. He didn't sleep. At 5:30 a.m., he got up, showered, dressed in his janitor's uniform because he didn't know what else to wear. Left a note for Luna early shift. Love you. Money for breakfast on the counter. He arrived at Helix Corps at 6:47 a.m. The building was dark except for security lighting and a few scattered offices where the truly dedicated or truly insomniac worked. Ethan badged in, took the elevator to the 41st floor. Conference room B was lit. Through the glass walls he could see Ava Liang sitting at the head of the table. 2 coffee cups in front of her, a stack of papers, his papers spread out like evidence. He stood outside the door for 10 seconds, gathering courage. Then he knocked. Ava looked up, gestured him in. Ethan entered. The door closed behind him with a soft click that sounded like a cell door locking. Sit, Ava said. Not unkindly, but not a request either. He sat. She pushed one of the coffee cups toward him. He didn't touch it. They stared at each other across the table. CEO and janitor. Power and invisibility. Except something had shifted, and Ethan wasn't sure which was which anymore. You wrote this, Ava said. Not a question. Ethan's first instinct was to deny it. His second instinct was to run. His third instinct, the one he listened to, was to tell the truth. Yes. Ava nodded slowly, like he'd confirmed something she'd already known. How did I write it, or how did you know it was me, both? Ethan reached for the coffee after all. His hands needed something to do. I have a PhD in applied linguistics, specialized in multilingual risk assessment for biotech contracts. I taught at UW for 6 years before... He stopped. Before my life changed. Your wife, Ava said quietly. Maria died 2 years ago. Ovarian cancer. Ethan's head snapped up. How do you... Employee records, she repeated. Emergency contact history. Previous employment verification. Her expression softened. I'm sorry. That must have been devastating. It was. And you ended up here? Cleaning floors? Ava leaned forward. Why didn't you go back to academia? Why not freelance consulting? With your background, you could be making... I needed stability, Ethan cut in. Benefits, steady paycheck, no dissertation deadlines or grant applications or publish or perish pressure. Just work I could do and then go home to my daughter. He met her eyes. You can't understand that from your side of the table. You're right, Ava said. I can't, but I can respect it. She picked up his analysis, flipped to a page covered in annotations. This is extraordinary work, Ethan. You didn't just translate the contract. You performed a complete forensic linguistic analysis. You caught things my entire legal team missed. Your legal team was reading for compliance, Ethan said. I was reading for intent. There's a difference. Explain. He took a breath. This was it. The moment where he either convinced her or condemned himself. Whoever drafted this contract, and I'm betting it wasn't Munich's standard legal team, used a technique called linguistic camouflage. They embedded high-risk clauses in phrasing that looks standard to automated compliance checks and even to careful human readers. But if you understand the underlying structure, if you know how language can be weaponized... He pulled the contract toward him, flipped to paragraph 14. Look at this. Datenübertragung im Rahmen dieser Partnerschaft. On its face, data transfer within the partnership framework. Standard stuff. But the phrase im Rahmen can mean within the scope of, or as a condition of. Small difference. Massive legal implication. Ava leaned in, following his finger on the page. Then here, Ethan continued, warming to the topic in a way he hadn't in years. The clause says uneingeschränkten Zugriff, unrestricted access, not negotiated access or limited access or even partnership access. Unrestricted. Combined with the ambiguity in im Rahmen, you get a clause that could be interpreted as signing this partnership requires surrendering unrestricted access to all databases as a condition of the partnership existing. That's not what Munich told us it meant, Ava said, her voice hardening. No, I'm betting they told you it was standard data sharing for collaborative research. They did. And technically they're not lying. It could mean that. But in court under GDPR, under CCPA, with the right lawyers or the wrong ones, it means Helix Corp just gave away legal ownership of patient data without consent. Ethan sat back. That's a criminal offense in 13 jurisdictions. Ava was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was different. Colder. You think this was intentional? Not a translation error. A trap. I know it was intentional. Look at paragraph 31. Datensouveränitätsübertragung. That's not a real term. I checked every legal dictionary, every database. Someone made it up specifically for this contract, which means someone is drafting custom language designed to slip past review and create binding obligations you can't escape once signed. Who? I don't know, but they're good. Really good. This kind of work requires expertise in German legal language, American and European regulatory frameworks, and biotech-specific contract law. There aren't many people who have all three. Ava stood, walked to the window. Outside, Seattle was waking up. Traffic building, lights coming on in office towers. A city of invisible people making visible things happen. If we'd signed this, she said quietly, what would have happened? Best case, years of litigation, millions in legal fees, reputation damage. Worst case, Munich or whoever's behind them gets legal access to your entire genomic database, strips your IP, and sells it to the highest bidder, while you're stuck in court trying to prove the contract language was ambiguous. And our patients, their genetic data ends up in servers in Munich, or Shanghai, or Moscow, wherever Munich's real backers are located. Ava turned back to him. How do I know you're not part of this? How do I know you're not the inside man planting evidence? It was the smart question, the CEO question. Ethan respected her more for asking it. You don't, he said simply. You have to make a choice. Trust the analysis, or trust Munich's version. But Ava... He used her first name, deliberately crossing a line. If I were the inside man, I wouldn't have done it anonymously. I would have waited until after you signed, then sold proof of your liability to your competitors. The anonymous delivery. That's someone trying to help while staying invisible. Why stay invisible? Now it was Ethan's turn to walk to the window. Because visibility is expensive. Because I have a daughter who needs stability more than she needs a father with a reputation. Because, and he stopped, then decided to finish. Because I've been invisible so long, I forgot how to be anything else. The room was silent except for the hum of the building coming to life around them. The challenge is still open, Ava said finally. $400,000. You earned it. I don't want the money. She blinked. What? I don't want the money. I don't want PR. I don't want my name in company newsletters or my face at press conferences. Ethan turned to face her. I want one thing. What? I want every contract that comes through this company to be reviewed the way I reviewed that one. I want you to hire someone who understands that language is a weapon and compliance isn't the same as safety. And I want that person to work quietly without fanfare like a janitor sweeping floors. Because the best security is invisible. Ava stared at him like he'd spoken in one of his 5 languages. You're serious? Completely. You're turning down $400,000 to keep cleaning floors. No, Ethan said. I'm turning down $400,000 to do the work that actually matters. Whether that's from a janitor's closet or a legal office, I don't care. But I need it to be quiet. I need it to protect Luna. I need it to be on my terms. Ava sat down slowly, picked up his analysis, set it down, picked it up again. I need 24 hours, she said. For what? To verify everything you've told me. To have my team triple-check your findings. To figure out how to extract us from this Munich deal without triggering a lawsuit. She looked at him. And to decide if I can trust a janitor who won't take money but wants power. I don't want power, Ethan said. I want purpose. In my experience, those are the same thing. Ava stood, gathered her papers. At the door, she paused. The school showcase next month. Your daughter's doing a project on invisible workers. Ethan's blood went cold. How do you know that? The same way I know everything that happens in my building. I pay attention. She smiled, and it was almost warm. Luna's right, you know. People don't see the essential until it's gone. Maybe it's time we all started looking. She left. Ethan stood alone in conference room B, watching the sun rise over Seattle, wondering if he'd just saved his daughter's future or destroyed it. His phone buzzed. Text from Luna. "Good luck with your early shift. Love you." He texted back, "Love you more, sunshine. Today's going to be interesting." That he thought was the understatement of the year. By noon, the entire executive floor knew something was wrong. Ethan could feel it in the air like ozone before a lightning strike. Lawyers moved with purpose between offices. Doors that were usually open stayed closed. The normal buzz of conversation had been replaced by urgent, hushed voices and the rapid-fire clicking of keyboards. He was refilling paper towels in the 40th floor bathroom when he overheard two junior analysts talking by the sinks. "Emergency board meeting," one said, washing his hands with the kind of aggressive scrubbing that spoke to anxiety. "Scheduled for 4 p.m. That's 3 hours from now." "What's it about?" "Munich deal. Apparently there's some kind of problem with the contract." The other analyst dried his hands, checked his reflection. "Problem. We've been working on this for 8 months, signing ceremonies in 4 days. Was in 4 days. Now I'm hearing they might postpone. Shit. Bryce is going to lose his mind." They left, and Ethan stood alone in the bathroom, staring at his reflection in the mirror. The fluorescent lights made him look older than 40. Tired. But his eyes looked alive in a way they hadn't in 3 years. He pulled out his phone. Texted Luna. "Might be late again tonight. Order pizza if you get hungry. Emergency at work." She replied immediately, "Everything okay will be. Love you more." He pocketed the phone and went back to work, every nerve ending on high alert. At 2:47 p.m., his supervisor Ramon found him wiping down a conference table on the 39th floor. "Ethan, I need you upstairs. 43rd floor main boardroom. They want it spotless before 4. "The board meeting." Ramon's eyebrows went up. "How'd you know about that? I hear things." "Well, keep what you hear to yourself, yeah. This one's sensitive. CEO's orders only essential personnel in that room." He handed Ethan a key card. "This gets you into the executive kitchen. Stock the coffee station, make sure everything's perfect. In and out, understand?" Understood. Ethan took the elevator up. The 43rd floor was different from the rest of the building, quieter, more expensive, with art on the walls that probably cost more than his annual salary. The boardroom sat at the corner, all glass walls, and a view of Elliott Bay that made Seattle look like a promise someone had actually kept. He let himself into the executive kitchen, started the industrial coffee maker, arranged cups and saucers with hands that were steadier than they had any right to be. Through the open door, he could see into the boardroom. Someone had already set up a projector. Papers were stacked at each seat around the massive table. And there on the screen was his analysis. His heart kicked hard against his ribs. Voices in the hallway. Ethan moved quickly, finishing with the coffee station, heading for the service door. He was almost out when Ava's voice stopped him. "Ethan." He turned. She stood in the doorway wearing a charcoal suit that looked like armor and an expression that gave nothing away. "Stay," she said. "I'm just the janitor." "Not anymore." She gestured to a chair against the wall, partially hidden by a decorative screen. "Sit there. Don't speak unless I ask you to. But I need you in this room." "Ava, I can't." "Yes, you can, and you will." Her voice softened just slightly. "Trust me. Please." Ethan looked at the chair, looked at her, made a choice that felt like jumping off a cliff without knowing if there was water below. He sat. The board members started arriving at 3:47 p.m. Ethan recognized some from company photos. Margaret Chen, head of R&D, a woman who'd published more papers than some universities. David Park, chief technology officer, the kind of programmer who'd built companies from dorm rooms. And Galen Hart, CFO, who looked like he'd aged a decade since this morning. Bryce Kincaid arrived last at 3:59 p.m., all confidence and expensive cologne. He took a seat near the head of the table across from Ava and smiled like a man who owned the room. Ava stood. "Thank you all for coming on short notice. I know this disrupts schedules, but we have a situation that requires immediate attention." "The Munich deal," Bryce said, his smile never wavering. "Ava, if this is about cold feet, we've been over the numbers. This partnership is worth $470 million over 5 years. Ava cut in. "Yes, Bryce, I know the numbers. I also know what the contract actually says versus what we were told it says." The room went still. Margaret leaned forward. "What are you talking about?" Ava clicked a remote. The screen changed, showing paragraph 14 of the Munich contract, the German text highlighted in red. "This clause, we were told it was standard data sharing protocol for collaborative research. It's not." "Our legal team reviewed it," Bryce said, and now there was an edge to his voice. "Mira signed off on it." "Mira signed off on Munich's translation," Ava corrected, "which, as it turns out, was strategically incomplete." She clicked again. Now the screen showed Ethan's analysis, his annotations clear and damning. "This is a complete linguistic forensic review done by someone with expertise in multilingual biotech contract law. And what they found is that Munich didn't just give us an incomplete translation. They gave us a trap." David Park picked up the packet of papers at his seat, started reading. His expression changed as he went through the pages. "This says, Ava, this says we'd be legally obligated to provide unrestricted database access, patient genetic data, clinical trial results, everything. Without consent protocols," Ava added. "Without regulatory oversight, without any mechanism for us to audit what Munich does with that data once they have it." Galen's face had gone pale. "That's a GDPR violation. That's a CCPA violation. That's criminal liability in multiple jurisdictions," Ava finished. "Yes." Bryce stood up. "This is absurd. You're telling me that Munich Genetische Forschung, a reputable firm with a 20-year history, deliberately planted malicious language in a partnership contract based on what? An anonymous analysis from God knows who? Based on this?" Ava clicked the remote again. The screen now showed an email chain. Metadata pulled from document revisions. Munich's contract wasn't drafted by their standard legal team. It came from an external consultant, someone with expertise in multilingual contract law and a history of, let's call them, aggressive negotiation tactics. Margaret squinted at the screen. "Who's the consultant?" "We're still tracing that," Ava said. "But here's what we do know. The phrasing patterns in this contract match patterns in 3 other deals Munich has signed in the last 18 months. A partnership with a Brazilian pharmaceutical company, a licensing agreement with a Japanese biotech firm, and a research collaboration with a South Korean genetics lab." As she clicked through slides showing sections of different contracts, all marked with similar highlighting. In each case, the contracts contained buried clauses that gave Munich access to proprietary data or intellectual property under the guise of partnership protocols. In each case, the partner company didn't realize what they'd signed until it was too late. The room erupted. "Why didn't we know about this? How did you get access to their other contracts? Who did this analysis?" Ava held up a hand. "The analysis was done by someone internal, someone with the expertise to catch what our entire legal team missed. As for the other contracts, let's just say When you start pulling threads, sometimes the whole sweater unravels. Bryce's smile was gone now. Ava, with all due respect, this is paranoid conspiracy thinking. You're jeopardizing a $500 million deal based on one person's interpretation of contract language. Language that, I might add, Munich's lawyers have assured us is standard. Show me the emails, Ava said. Bryce blinked. What? The emails from Munich's lawyers assuring you the language is standard. Show me. I don't have them here. Interesting. Ava's voice went cold. Because I asked it to pull all correspondence related to the Munich deal. Every email, every Slack message, every phone log. And what they found is fascinating. She clicked the remote. The screen changed to show an email thread. Bryce's name was at the top. These emails, Ava said, show you communicating directly with someone named Klaus Brenner. Not Munich's official legal team, not their CEO. A consultant named Klaus Brenner, whose email address bounces through 3 different servers before landing at a Munich IP address. Bryce's jaw tightened. Klaus is their liaison. He coordinates between their legal team and ours. Really? Because when I called Munich's CEO this morning, he'd never heard of Klaus Brenner. Said they don't use external liaisons. All communications go through their official channels. The room went deathly quiet. Margaret looked from the screen to Bryce. You've been negotiating this deal through someone Munich doesn't acknowledge. It's a miscommunication, Bryce said, but his voice had lost its certainty. Maybe Klaus works for one of their subsidiary firms. Or maybe, Ava said quietly, Klaus Brenner is exactly what he appears to be. A ghost. Someone who exists only in email chains and contract revisions. Someone who's very good at making aggressive clauses look like standard language. David Park was scrolling through the analysis on his tablet. There's a term here, Datensouveränitätsübertragung. The analyst says it doesn't exist in standard German legal vocabulary. It doesn't, said a voice from the corner. Everyone turned. Ethan stood his heart hammering so hard he thought the entire room could hear it. He'd made it this far, staying invisible. But some moments required being seen. Ava nodded once. Permission. That term, Ethan continued, his voice steadier than his hands, is a fabrication. A compound word that sounds legal but has no established definition in German contract law, which means whoever wrote it could interpret it however they want in court. It's a linguistic fingerprint, a signature. Bryce stared at him. And you are someone who speaks German, Ethan said simply. Someone who knows how language can be weaponized. Someone who read this contract and saw the trap. The janitor, Margaret said, and her voice wasn't mocking, it was wondering. You're the one who did this analysis. I am. Bryce laughed. It was a harsh sound, desperate. So we're making billion-dollar decisions based on the opinion of someone who mops floors. This is insane. Ava, you've lost perspective. This man, he could be anyone. He could have his own agenda. My agenda, Ethan interrupted, is making sure this company doesn't sign a contract that would expose patient data and destroy everything Ava's built. That's it. I don't want money. I don't want credit. I just want you to actually read what you're about to sign. Galen had been quiet this whole time, but now he spoke up. I've been going through the financial projections Bryce provided, the revenue numbers from Munich. They're aggressive, but plausible. But if we're giving them database access, if they're getting our IP for free under these buried clauses, he looked up at Bryce. These projections are fantasy. We'd be paying them to strip mine our own company. That's not true. Show us the Klaus Brenner emails, Ava repeated. All of them. Right now. Bryce's face had gone red. I don't have to justify every communication. You do, if you want this deal to proceed. You do, if you want to keep your position. Ava's voice was steel wrapped in ice. Show us the emails, Bryce, or I'm calling security. For a long moment, Bryce didn't move. Then slowly he pulled out his laptop, opened his email, turned the screen toward the room. David Park leaned in, started scrolling. His expression darkened with each passing second. Jesus Christ! Bryce, these emails! He's giving you phrasing, specific contract language. You're not negotiating, you're taking dictation. Margaret grabbed the laptop, read for herself. This email from last month. Klaus tells you to push for the signing ceremony before the full board review. Says it's better to secure momentum before legal gets too deep into details. She looked at Bryce with something like pity. You knew this contract was dirty, and you pushed it anyway. No, Bryce said, but the word came out weak. I thought Klaus said it was standard practice. Aggressive, but standard. He said every major partnership has these kinds of clauses. And you believed him, Ava said, because the commission on this deal would have set you up for life. How much, Bryce? How much was Klaus offering you? The silence was answer enough. Galen stood his chair scraping against the expensive floor. We need to freeze this deal, now, before Munich realizes we're onto them. The signing ceremony is in 4 days, Margaret said. We've already sent press releases. Partners are flying in from Germany. If we back out now. If we don't back out now, Ethan said, stepping fully into the room. You'll be in federal court in 6 months explaining why you gave away patient genetic data to an entity you can't even verify. The PR damage from canceling a signing ceremony, that's nothing compared to the PR damage from a GDPR lawsuit. David Park nodded slowly. He's right. We cancel. We eat the embarrassment. We survive. Ava looked at each board member in turn, then at Bryce, who'd shrunk in his seat like a balloon losing air. Then at Ethan, still standing against the wall in his janitor's uniform, still somehow the most credible person in the room. All in favor of freezing the Munich deal pending full investigation, Ava said. Every hand went up except Bryce's. Motion carries. Ava picked up her phone, dialed. Mira, it's Ava. I need you to draft a formal withdrawal from the Munich partnership, effective immediately. Yes, I know about the ceremony. Cancel it. I don't care about the optics, do it now. She paused, listening. Because if we don't, we'll be defending a criminal case. That's why. She hung up, looked at Bryce. You're suspended pending investigation. Security will escort you out. Clean out your desk. Don't take any files. Don't contact anyone at Munich. Don't speak to the press. Understood. Bryce stood his face a mask of fury and fear. You're making a mistake. Klaus is legitimate. This deal is legitimate. You're throwing away $500 million because some janitor, that janitor, Margaret said quietly, just saved this company. Show some gratitude. Bryce looked at Ethan with something that might have been hatred or might have been envy. Then he walked out, and 30 seconds later 2 security guards appeared to escort him from the building. The door closed. The room exhaled. Ava sat down heavily. Somebody tell me we're doing the right thing. We are, David said. If even half of what this analysis shows is true, we just dodged a bullet the size of a freight train. Margaret turned to Ethan. You really did all this alone? Yes, ma'am. Why? It was the question he'd been asking himself for days. Why risk everything? Why step out of invisibility? Why care about a company that saw him as furniture? Because I have a daughter, Ethan said finally. And she's learning from me what matters in life. What I do when nobody's watching. What I stand up for when it costs me something. He looked at Ava. I couldn't let her see me stay silent when I knew something was wrong. Even if it meant losing my job. Even if it meant losing everything. Some things matter more than safety. The room was quiet. Then Margaret started clapping. Slowly. Then David joined. Then Galen. Then the whole room was applauding, and Ethan stood there in his janitor's uniform, accepting recognition he'd never wanted, and definitely didn't know how to handle. Ava stood, walked over to him, extended her hand. I owe you an apology. And a job offer. But first, thank you. For your courage. For your integrity. For proving that intelligence and expertise exist everywhere, even where we're too blind to look. Ethan shook her hand. Her grip was firm, certain. I don't want a job that puts me in front of cameras or turns me into a poster boy for... I know, Ava said. You made that clear. What I'm offering is different. A position. No title if you don't want one. No public profile. Just you doing what you just did. Reading contracts, finding traps, keeping us safe. Quiet work, essential work. Interested. Before Ethan could answer, Mira burst through the door. We have a problem. Munich just issued a press release. They're calling our withdrawal a breach of good faith. They're threatening to sue for damages. Let them, Ava said. We have documentation of fraudulent contract language. Let them explain Klaus Brenner in court. There's more. Mira pulled up something on her tablet. Someone leaked to the press. There's already an article online. Helix Corps backs out of major partnership after internal whistleblower exposes contract fraud. Galen swore. Who leaked? I don't know. But they're calling the source an internal linguistic expert. They don't have a name, but... Mira looked at Ethan. It's only a matter of time before someone puts it together. Ethan's stomach dropped. I need to get home. I need to get to my daughter. Go, Ava said immediately. Take tomorrow off. We'll handle the press. We'll keep your name out of it. You have my word. Ethan was already moving toward the door. If reporters show up at my apartment, they won't? I'll make sure of it. Ava called after him. Ethan, we're not done talking about that job offer. But Ethan was already in the elevator, already pulling out his phone, already calling Luna. She picked up on the second ring. Dad, what's wrong? Nothing, sunshine. Everything's okay. I'm coming home early. Want to order that pizza? Pineapple and olives. Despite everything, he smiled. Yeah, even that. I'll be there in 30 minutes. Don't answer the door for anyone, okay? Okay. She paused. Dad, you sound weird. Are you sure you're okay? I'm better than okay, he said, and realized it was true. For the first time in 3 years, he felt like someone who mattered. I love you, Luna. Love you more. The elevator descended, and through the glass walls, Ethan could see Seattle spreading out below 43 floors of distance between where he'd been and where he was going. He'd climbed out of invisibility. The question now was whether he'd survive being seen. The pizza was cold by the time Ethan got home. Traffic had been worse than expected, and his hands had shaken so badly at one red light that he'd had to pull over and breathe for 3 minutes before he could continue driving. By the time he unlocked their apartment door, it was past 7, and Luna was on the couch with her sketchbook drawing something that looked like the Seattle skyline made entirely of hands reaching upward. She looked up when he entered. You're late. Pizza's been here for 20 minutes. Sorry, sunshine. Work got complicated. Luna set down her pencil, really looked at him. 12 years old, and she could read him like he used to read contracts, seeing what was there and what was carefully hidden. Something happened. It wasn't a question. Ethan set down his keys, his phone, his bag. sat on the couch beside her. Yeah, something happened. Good something or bad something. I don't know yet. They ate cold pizza together, and Ethan told her an edited version that he'd found a problem at work, that he'd helped fix it, that things might be different now. He didn't tell her about Bryce, or Munich, or the $500 million that almost destroyed everything. She was 12. She deserved protection from the weight of what he'd done. But Luna wasn't 12 in the way most 12-year-olds were. She'd grown up fast, watching her mother die, watching her father shrink, learning too early that the world was full of beautiful things that could be taken away. Different how? She asked, picking pineapple off her slice with surgical precision. I might not be cleaning floors anymore. Her head snapped up. You got fired? No, the opposite. I think I might have gotten promoted. Luna's eyes went wide, then suspicious, then cautious. To what? I don't know yet. They want to talk to me tomorrow about a new position, something that uses my actual skills instead of just my ability to push a mop. For a long moment, Luna didn't say anything. Then quietly, does this have to do with your 5 languages? Yeah, sunshine, it does. Can I tell Tyler? The question hit Ethan like a punch. Sweet and fierce, and so full of the need to defend him that his chest ached. Not yet. Soon maybe. But right now this needs to stay quiet. Between us. Okay. Luna nodded, but he could see the wheels turning in her head. She was her mother's daughter, patient when she needed to be, but always thinking 3 moves ahead. They finished dinner. Watched a nature documentary about wolves that Luna wanted to use as reference for a painting. She fell asleep on the couch around 9:30, and Ethan carried her to bed for the 2nd night in a row, wondering how many more times he'd be able to do this before she got too big, too old, too independent. He was cleaning up the pizza boxes when his phone lit up with notifications, not texts. News alerts. The first headline made his stomach drop. Helix Core Biogen withdraws from major Munich partnership after internal review. The second was worse. Sources say contract fraud discovered by internal expert. The third was worst. Whistleblower at Helix Core exposes multi-million-dollar scam company silent on identity. Ethan sat down hard at the kitchen table. They didn't have his name. Ava had kept her promise about that. But the story was out there, spreading across tech news sites and biotech forums like wildfire. By morning, it would be in the Seattle Times. By tomorrow afternoon, national news. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He let it go to voicemail. Buzzed again. Different unknown number. Again, to voicemail. By 10 p.m., he'd received 7 calls from numbers he didn't recognize. Reporters, probably. Investors. Competitors trying to figure out what had happened inside Helix Core's walls. Ethan turned off his phone and sat in the dark kitchen listening to the sounds of the city through their thin windows. Sirens. Traffic. The eternal hum of Seattle never quite sleeping. He'd wanted to help. He'd wanted to do the right thing. But sitting here in the dark with Luna asleep down the hall and the world suddenly interested in a janitor who'd stepped out of line, he wondered if doing the right thing was the same as doing the smart thing. Sleep came in fits and starts. By 5 a.m., Ethan gave up and got out of bed, made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and turned his phone back on. 23 missed calls, 14 voicemails, 46 text messages. Most were from numbers he didn't know, but 3 were from Ava. Don't talk to press. Don't confirm anything. Come in through loading dock at 9 a.m. We need to talk. One was from Mira Legal wants to meet with you. Bring any documentation you have. And one oddly was from Margaret Chen, the head of R&D he'd met in the boardroom. Thank you. You saved more than a company. You saved people's trust. That matters. Ethan stared at that last message for a long time. Then he got dressed, left a note for Luna about money for breakfast, and drove to Helix Core through the gray Seattle dawn. The loading dock was around back, accessible only to delivery trucks and maintenance staff. Ethan badged in at 8:47 a.m., took the service elevator up, and found himself on the 41st floor in hallways that felt different than they had just yesterday. People looked at him. Not through him, not past him, not around him. At him. A paralegal he'd never spoken to nodded as he passed. A senior associate actually said morning, like Ethan was a person who deserved greetings. Two lawyers stopped their conversation when he approached, then resumed it in hushed tones after he'd passed. The invisible man had become visible, and visibility Ethan was learning was its own kind of weight. He made it to Ava's office at 8:58 a.m. Her assistant, a sharp-eyed woman named Grace, who'd never once acknowledged his existence in 3 years of him emptying her trash can, actually smiled. "She's expecting you. Go right in." Ethan knocked anyway. Old habits. "Come in," Ava called. She was at her desk, surrounded by papers and coffee cups, and the particular chaos of someone who'd been up all night managing a crisis. But when she saw him, she stood, and something in her expression softened. "You came through the loading dock." "You told me to. I wasn't sure you would." "Sit." Ethan sat. Ava poured coffee from a French press into 2 mugs, handed him one, and settled into the chair beside him, instead of behind her desk. The gesture felt deliberate, equalizing. "The press is going insane," she said. "Every tech journalist in Seattle wants to know who found the contract fraud. Munich is threatening to sue. Our stock price jumped 4% because investors think we dodged a disaster. And the board wants to give you a standing ovation." "I don't want a standing ovation." "I know. You made that clear." Ava pulled an envelope from her desk drawer. Thick, official-looking. She set it between them like evidence. "This is a check for $400,000. My quarterly salary as promised. It's yours. You earned it." Ethan didn't touch the envelope. "I don't want it." "Ethan, I don't want the money, Ava. I don't want the recognition. I don't want my picture in the company newsletter or my name on a press release." He leaned forward. "I told you what I want. A role that lets me do this work. The work that actually matters without making me a symbol or a story or a poster boy for some feel-good narrative about janitors being secretly brilliant. I want to work. Quietly, effectively, without fanfare." Ava studied him like he was a contract she was trying to decode. "Do you have any idea how rare that is? Most people would take this money and run, or leverage it into a promotion with a corner office and a title they could put on LinkedIn." "I'm not most people." "No," she said quietly. "You're really not." She picked up the envelope, set it aside, pulled out a different folder. This one was thinner, neater, with the Helix Core logo embossed on the cover. "I had HR draw up a proposal last night. Custom position. No official title unless you want one. Your job would be to review every major contract that comes through this company with the same forensic attention you gave to Munich. You'd report directly to me, no publicity requirements, no client-facing obligations, just you, the contracts, and your expertise." Ethan's heart was doing something complicated. "Salary, double what you make now, plus benefits, plus a discretionary bonus structure based on what you catch." She slid the folder across. "It's not 400,000, but it's sustainable. And it's yours if you want it." He opened the folder. The title line read, "Senior Linguistic Risk Analyst." Salary $127,000. Start date immediate. It was more money than he'd made since leaving academia, more security than he'd had in 3 years, more recognition of his actual worth than he'd allowed himself to hope for. But something about it felt wrong. "I can't," Ethan said. Ava blinked. "Can't what? Take this, not like this." He closed the folder, pushed it back. "Ava, if I accept a titled position with a public salary and a place on the org chart, I become visible. Permanently. And when I become visible, so does Luna. So does our story. Reporters will find out about Maria, about why I left academia, about the medical debt and the grief, and all the private pain I've spent 3 years keeping private, so my daughter doesn't have to live under that shadow. We can protect your privacy." "Can you?" Ethan's voice rose despite himself. "You just told me the press is going insane. How long before someone connects Dr. Ethan Morales, former UW professor, to Ethan Morales, Helix Corps janitor, turned analyst? How long before they write the heartwarming story about the fallen academic who rose from the ashes? I don't want that story told. It's mine, it's Luna's, and we get to decide who knows it." Ava was quiet for a long moment. Then, "What do you want, Ethan, really? Because I'm trying to do right by you, and I'm clearly missing something." Ethan took a breath. This was it. The moment where he either asked for what he actually needed or accepted what was being offered, and hoped it wouldn't destroy him. "I want a role," he said slowly. "I want to do this work. I want to be paid fairly for it. But I don't want a title. I don't want an office with my name on it. I don't want to be on the org chart where people can find me. I want to work like a janitor works, essential, effective, and invisible until the moment I'm needed." That's unusual. Everything about this situation is unusual. Ethan leaned forward. "You need someone who can read between the lines, who can catch the traps before they spring, who understands that language is a weapon and compliance isn't the same as safety. I can be that person, but I can only be that person if I'm not also being the inspiration story or the human interest piece or the example of untapped potential. I'm a father first, an analyst second. Everything else is negotiable." Ava stood, walked to her window. 41 floors up Seattle, spread out like a circuit board of lights and ambition. She stood there for what felt like hours, but was probably only 90 seconds. Then she turned back. "Let's go to the roof." "What? The roof? We need to have this conversation somewhere no one can overhear. Come on." She led him through the executive floor past curious eyes and hushed conversations to a door marked "Roof Access, Authorized Personnel Only." Ava swiped her badge. The door clicked open. They climbed a narrow staircase and emerged onto the roof. The morning air was cold and clean, carrying the smell of salt water from Elliott Bay. Up here, the city noise faded to a distant hum. Up here, they could talk without walls listening. Ava walked to the edge, where a safety railing kept people from getting too close to the drop. "I built this company on 2 principles," she said without looking at him. "Talent exists everywhere, and integrity matters more than profit." "I know." The Munich deal almost broke both those principles. We were about to sign away our integrity because we assumed expertise only existed in expensive consulting firms. We were about to ignore warning signs because the profit potential was too attractive. She turned to face him. "You stopped that. A janitor with a PhD and a moral compass stopped that. And now you're telling me the reward for doing the right thing is to stay invisible." "I'm telling you that visibility has costs I can't afford," Ethan corrected. "Luna's in middle school. She's trying to figure out who she is without the weight of her mother's death defining her. If my story goes public, she becomes the daughter of the Helix Corps whistleblower, or the kid whose dad used to be somebody. I won't do that to her. So what do you want specifically? Ethan had been thinking about this all night. I want an off-book contract, freelance maybe, or a consulting arrangement, something that lets me review your contracts without being an official employee. Pay me as a vendor. Give me access to the documents I need to read, but keep my name out of internal directories, no email address on the company domain, no desk with a nameplate. I'll work from home or from a library, or from wherever I need to work. You tell people you hired an external linguistic consultant, anonymous, effective, safe. Ava stared at him. You're asking to be a ghost. I'm asking to do important work without sacrificing my daughter's privacy. If that makes me a ghost, fine. I've been invisible for 3 years. I'm good at it. The wind picked up, carrying the sound of the city waking up below them. Ava crossed her arms against the cold. I'll need to run this past legal, she said finally. And HR will have a fit because this doesn't fit any existing structure. But Ethan, she met his eyes. If I can make this work, if I can give you the ghost arrangement you're asking for, you have to promise me something. What? That you'll actually do the work. That you won't disappear on me when things get hard or complicated, or when the next Munich comes along. Her voice was intense. I need someone I can trust with the contracts that could destroy us. Someone who understands the stakes. Someone who won't sell out to the highest bidder or leak to competitors. Can you be that person? Yes. Even if it means working nights, missing Luna's school events, sometimes being on call when deals are moving fast. Ethan thought about the last 3 years. The night shifts, the double jobs, the constant scramble to make rent and keep Luna fed and pretend everything was fine when nothing was fine. I've been working nights for 3 years, he said. At least now it'll be for work that matters. And Luna understands sacrifice when it's for something real. She'll understand this. Ava extended her hand. Then we have a deal. I'll draw up the paperwork. Freelance contract. NDAs tighter than Fort Knox. Payment structure that reflects your expertise without creating a public record. You'll get access to everything you need. But Ethan, she squeezed his hand. Thank you. For saving us. For having the courage to speak up when staying silent would have been easier. For being exactly who you are. They shook on it there on the roof, 43 floors above Seattle. The city spreading out below them like a promise that maybe, just maybe, was about to be kept. When they went back inside, the world felt different. Lighter. Like a door had opened that Ethan had assumed was locked forever. Ava took him to a small office on the 39th floor. No windows, no nameplate. Just a desk, a laptop, a secure phone line, and a filing cabinet. This is your space, she said. Officially, it's a storage room. Unofficially, it's where you'll work when you need to be on site. We'll set up remote access for you to review contracts from home. But when you need to be here, this is yours. Ethan walked into the room. It smelled like fresh paint and possibility. On the desk was a stack of contracts waiting for review. The top one had a sticky note, Brazil Partnership, Needs Eyes. Mira. Start whenever you're ready, Ava said. Take today to settle in. Tomorrow we announce to the team that we've hired an external consultant for contract review. No name, no details, just someone who'll be working behind the scenes to keep us safe. She left him there. Ethan sat at the desk, opened the Brazil contract, and felt something he hadn't felt in 3 years' purpose. The contract was dense. Portuguese with English annotations. A biotech partnership with a firm in Sao Paulo. Revenue-sharing IP licensing collaborative research protocols. He read for 20 minutes before he found it a clause buried in Section 23 that granted the Brazilian firm unrestricted access to derivative research products resulting from collaborative efforts. Derivative research products, meaning anything Helix Core developed that touched the partnership even tangentially. It was the same trap as Munich. Different language, different jurisdiction, same poison. Ethan marked it up, wrote a 3-page analysis, walked it to Mira's office. She looked up from her computer, startled. "Ethan, I thought you were taking the day." "Section 23, he said, handing her the analysis. "Same pattern as Munich. Different phrasing, same trap. You need to renegotiate before this goes to the board." Mira read his notes. Her face went pale. "Jesus, this clause, if we'd signed this, you'd have given away IP rights to every project that even mentions the Brazil partnership, including projects they have no investment in. How did we miss this? Because whoever's drafting these is very, very good at making poison look like medicine." Ethan turned to leave. "I'll do a full review by tomorrow, but you should probably call Sao Paulo today." He walked back to his office, his storage room, and found Galen Hart waiting in the hallway. The CFO looked like he'd aged another year overnight. "Heard you caught the Brazil trap." "Just doing my job." "That's not a job. That's a superpower." Galen extended his hand. "I owe you an apology. I laughed when Ava made that challenge. Thought it was a publicity stunt. I was wrong." Ethan shook his hand. "You weren't wrong to be skeptical. You were wrong to dismiss people based on their job titles." "Yeah." Galen's smile was rueful. "I'm learning that. Listen, I'm heading to get coffee. Want to join?" They walked to the coffee station together. People stared, whispered, the CFO and the janitor walking side by side like it was normal. At the coffee station, Galen poured 2 cups, handed one to Ethan. "Ava told me about your arrangement, the ghost consultant thing. And I think it's brilliant. Most people in your position would demand a corner office and a VP title. You're demanding the right to stay hidden." He sipped his coffee. "That takes a special kind of integrity. The kind where you care more about doing the work than getting credit for it. I care about protecting my daughter. That too." Galen studied him. "You know what Ava said to me this morning? She said silence isn't absence, it's precision. She was quoting you. From your analysis." Ethan blinked. "I wrote that. Paragraph 7, page 11. It's already becoming a thing around here. People are starting to understand that just because someone's quiet doesn't mean they're not essential." They finished their coffee in companionable silence. Then Galen went back to his office, and Ethan went back to his storage room, and the day unfolded like a normal day, except nothing was normal anymore. At 3 p.m., Ethan's phone buzzed. Text from Luna Tyler said something happened at Helix Core. "Big news. Something about contracts. Is that your thing?" Ethan stared at the message. Tyler, the 8th grader who thought janitors were stupid, the kid who'd made Luna cry. He texted back, "Might be. Tell you more tonight. Pick you up at 3:30. Can we get ice cream?" "Sunshine, we can get ice cream." He picked her up from school right on time. She climbed into the car with her backpack and her sketchbook, and eyes full of questions she wasn't quite asking yet. "Ice cream first," Ethan said. "Questions later." They went to their favorite place on Capitol Hill, a little shop that made flavors like lavender honey and balsamic strawberry. Luna got her usual chocolate chip. Ethan got coffee. They sat at a table by the window and watched Seattle walk by. "Tyler's dad works in tech," Luna said after her 3rd spoonful. "He heard about Helix Core canceling some big deal. Said someone internal caught fraud." Yeah. She looked at him over her ice cream. "Was it you?" Ethan set down his cup. "What makes you think that?" "Because you told me you did something that used your 5 languages. Because you came home yesterday looking like someone who'd just done something scary and important. Because you're different today. Lighter. She smiled. And because I'm your daughter and I pay attention. You do pay attention. So it was you. Yeah, sunshine. It was me. Luna's smile could have powered the entire city. Can I tell Tyler? Not yet. Soon, maybe. But right now what I did needs to stay quiet. There are people who might try to make it into a big story, and I don't want that story told until we're ready. Because of Mom. It wasn't a question. Luna understood more than he gave her credit for. Because of a lot of things, Ethan said. But yeah, partly because of Mom. Partly because I want to protect you from becoming the whistleblower's daughter, or some other label that isn't who you are. Luna ate more ice cream, thinking. But eventually Tyler will find out. Eventually. And when he does, can I be there? Ethan laughed. Yeah, when he finds out, you can absolutely be there. They finished their ice cream, drove home. And that night, while Luna worked on her art project about invisible workers, Ethan sat at their kitchen table with his laptop and reviewed contracts for a company that had finally learned to see him. The work was quiet. Essential. Exactly what he'd asked for. And for the first time in 3 years, Ethan Morales felt like he was exactly where he belonged. 3 weeks passed like water finding its level. Ethan settled into his new role the way he'd once settled into invisibility, quietly, effectively, without fanfare. He worked from home most days, reviewing contracts at the kitchen table, while Luna did homework across from him, both of them in comfortable silence, punctuated by occasional questions about math problems or German verb conjugations. But twice a week he came into Helix Core, used his storage room office, met with Mira and her team to discuss flagged clauses and regulatory implications, started teaching them what to look for, how to read not just what contracts said, but what they meant to say. Look at the verb tense, he'd tell them, pointing at a licensing agreement from a Tokyo firm. Present continuous versus future conditional. Small difference, but it changes who bears the liability if the research fails. The lawyers started taking notes, started asking questions, started seeing language the way Ethan saw it, as architecture that could be beautiful or could collapse and kill everyone inside. By the end of week 2, he'd caught 3 more problematic contracts. Nothing as egregious as Munich, but dangerous nonetheless. A data-sharing agreement with a London firm that would have created EU jurisdiction issues. A partnership with a Boston biotech that buried intellectual property transfers in footnotes. A vendor contract that looked standard until you realized the renewal clause was designed to lock Helix Core into 5-year commitments without price caps. You're a contract killer, David Park joked after Ethan flagged the vendor trap. In the best possible way. I just read carefully, Ethan said. No, Mira corrected, sitting across from him in his storage room office during one of their weekly review sessions. You read like someone who understands that words have consequences. That's not the same as reading carefully. That's reading with wisdom. The work was satisfying in a way cleaning floors had never been. Each contract he saved was a problem solved, a disaster averted, a future protected. And the best part, he did it all from the shadows. No press, no publicity. Just his name on a consulting contract and his analysis showing up in manila folders marked external review. The storage room slowly transformed. He brought in his old German law dictionary, added a second monitor, tacked a photo of Luna to the wall, her at 9, grinning gap-toothed at the camera, Maria's arm around her shoulders. The last good picture before the cancer made good pictures impossible. Some days, Ava would stop by. Never announced, just appearing in his doorway with coffee and questions. "The Singapore deal," she'd say. "Mira thinks it's clean. Your thoughts?" And Ethan would pull up the contract read for 20 minutes while Ava waited, then point to paragraph 19 and explain why the intellectual property clause was actually a time bomb designed to detonate in 18 months when the partnership renewal came up. "How do you see this stuff?" she asked once. "I don't know. How do you see market opportunities in genomic research that nobody else notices? That's different. That's vision." "So is this, just a different kind." Their professional relationship settled into something comfortable. Mutual respect wrapped in honest communication. She never asked about his past unless it was relevant to the work. He never questioned her decisions unless they impacted contract safety. They existed in the space where competence mattered more than hierarchy. But the world outside Ethan's quiet workspace was less settled. The Munich story had legs. Tech blogs picked it up. Business journals wrote analysis pieces about contract fraud in international partnerships. Someone Ethan suspected, one of the junior lawyers who'd been in the boardroom, leaked that the whistleblower was a non-traditional employee with unexpected expertise. The speculation was wild. Some people thought it was a hacker. Others guessed a disgruntled executive. One conspiracy theory suggested it was corporate espionage from a competitor. Nobody guessed janitor turned consultant. But Tyler's father guessed something. Ethan found out on a Thursday afternoon picking Luna up from school. She got in the car with her face doing something between triumph and worry. "Tyler knows," she said without preamble. Ethan's hands tightened on the wheel. "Knows what? That you're the one who caught the contract thing at Helix Core. His dad works at a competing biotech company, and apparently there's been talk in the industry about some kind of linguistic expert who found fraud that everyone else missed. And Tyler's dad remembered that you used to be a professor, and he put it together." "Shit," Ethan said quietly. "Dad, sorry, but shit." He pulled out of the parking lot, mind racing. What did Tyler say? Luna's expression shifted to something fierce and proud. He didn't believe it at first. Told his friends his dad was wrong, that there was no way someone who worked as a janitor could be the person everyone's talking about. So I showed him. Ethan's stomach dropped. "Showed him what?" "Your old faculty page. I found it on the Internet Archive. Dr. Ethan Morales, Department of Applied Linguistics, Specialist in Multilingual Risk Assessment for Biotech Contracts." She was grinning now. "His face went so red, Dad. And then one of his friends asked why you were working as a janitor if you had a PhD, and I told them about Mom, about the medical bills, about how you chose stability over pride because that's what good fathers do." "Luna." "And then I told them that you just saved a billion-dollar company from fraud, and that you're probably smarter than everyone in their families combined, and that they should think twice before they judge people based on their job titles." She was crying now, but they were good tears. Happy tears. "I defended you, Dad, the way you always defend me." Ethan had to pull over. Had to stop the car because his vision was blurring, and his chest was doing something that felt like breaking and healing at the same time. He pulled Luna into a hug across the center console. "You didn't have to do that, Sunshine." "Yes, I did. Because I'm proud of you. Because what you did matters. Because people need to know that intelligence and worth aren't defined by job titles." She pulled back, wiping her eyes. "And Tyler apologized. Actually apologized. Said his dad told him to because it takes a special kind of person to work 2 jobs and raise a daughter alone and still have the courage to speak up when something's wrong. Tyler's dad said that, yeah, apparently he called you an example of integrity the industry needs to learn from." Luna smiled. So can we get ice cream? I feel like this deserves ice cream. They got ice cream. And that night, while Luna worked on her art project, which had grown from a few sketches into a full multimedia presentation, Ethan's phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. Hello? Dr. Morales. This is Richard Chen, biotech industry journalist with TechCrunch. I'm doing a piece on contract fraud and international partnerships, and I've heard rumors about an analyst at Helix Corp who... Ethan hung up. The phone rang again. Different number. He let it go to voicemail. By the end of the night, he had 7 voicemails from journalists, 3 from industry bloggers, and 1 from someone claiming to be a documentary filmmaker. He called Ava. She picked up on the first ring. I saw the calls coming in. Tyler's father is James Chen, works at Nova Bio. He figured it out. Luna told me. Word's spreading in the industry. People are starting to connect Dr. Ethan Morales to the Helix Corp consultant. I can issue a statement denying everything but Ethan. Her voice was gentle. That might be closing a door that's already open. People know. Or they will soon. The question is how you want to handle it. Ethan walked to the window, looked out at their apartment complex, at the Seattle night, at the life he'd built from the ashes of the old one. I don't want to handle it. I want to keep working. Quietly. The way we agreed. I know. And you can. But you might have to accept that quiet looks different now. She paused. The school showcase is next week, right? Luna's art project. Yeah. How did you know? Because I pay attention, and because Mira's daughter goes to Pioneer Middle School. She mentioned Luna's doing something about invisible workers. Another pause. Maybe that's your answer, Ethan. Not hiding. Not publicizing. Just being honest about who you are and what you do. On your terms. In your time. I don't know how to do that. Neither did I when I started this company. But I learned. So will you. They hung up, and Ethan stood at the window for a long time, wondering if there was a version of this story where he got to stay invisible and still do the work that mattered. The answer he was starting to realize was no. The school showcase was scheduled for the following Friday evening. Luna had been working on her project every night for 3 weeks, and she'd refused to let Ethan see it before the presentation. You'll cry, she told him. And I need you to not cry until the actual event. I don't cry that easily. Dad? You cried at the documentary about penguins. That penguin walked 1,000 miles to find his mate. Anyone would cry. Friday arrived too fast and too slow. Ethan took the afternoon off, picked Luna up early, helped her load her presentation boards and laptop into the car. She was nervous in a way he'd rarely seen her, fidgeting with her sleeves, checking and rechecking that she had all her materials. You're going to be great, he told her. What if people don't get it? What if they think it's stupid? Then they're wrong. He squeezed her hand. You made something true. That's never stupid. The Pioneer Middle School gymnasium was decorated with student projects, science experiments, historical dioramas, creative writing portfolios. Luna's section was in the corner, marked with a hand-painted sign, "What you don't see, the essential invisible." Ethan helped her set up. There were 3 presentation boards covered in mixed media artwork photographs of janitors, bus drivers, cafeteria workers layered with Luna's drawings and watercolor paintings. Each portrait was accompanied by text describing what these workers did, why they mattered, how they kept the city running without recognition. The centerpiece was a triptych painting. Left panel, a man mopping a floor face in shadow. Center panel, the same man at a desk covered in papers surrounded by light. Right panel, the man and a young girl, hands clasped facing forward together. Ethan stared at it. Luna, is that You, she finished. It's you. All three versions. The invisible worker. The expert they didn't see. The father who was always both. She looked up at him with Maria's eyes. Is it okay? I know you wanted to stay private, but Dad, your story needs to be told. Not as inspiration porn or some feel-good narrative, but as truth, as proof that worth isn't visible, that the people we overlook might be exactly the people we need. Ethan's throat closed up. He pulled her into a hug. It's perfect, sunshine. It's so perfect. Parents started arriving around 6. Teachers circulated asking questions about projects. Luna stood by her presentation board, ready to explain her work. And then Ava Liang walked in. She was in casual clothes, jeans, a sweater, nothing that screamed CEO, but she carried herself with the same certainty she brought to boardrooms. She walked directly to Luna's section, studied the triptych for a long moment, then turned to Luna with a smile that was warm and genuine. You must be Luna. I'm Ava. I work with your father. Luna's eyes went wide. You're the CEO of Helix Corps. I am, and your father is one of the most valuable people in my company. But I think you already know that. Ava looked at the presentation boards. This is extraordinary work. The way you've layered the images, the way you've framed dignity and invisibility as two sides of the same struggle. It's mature beyond your years. My dad taught me to pay attention to what people ignore, Luna said quietly. He taught my whole company the same thing. Ava turned to Ethan. I brought some people. Hope that's okay. Before he could answer, Mira appeared, followed by Galen, then David Park, then Margaret Chen. Half the executive team of Helix Corps Biogen standing in a middle school gymnasium looking at a 12-year-old's art project about her father. We wanted to see, Mira said simply. Luna's presentation. Your story. More people arrived. Some Ethan recognized from Helix Corps, the paralegal who'd nodded at him in the hallway, the junior analyst who'd said good morning. Others were parents, teachers, students, drawn by the crowd gathering around Luna's section. Tyler and his father appeared. James Chen, the Nova Bio executive, who'd figured out Ethan's identity, extended his hand. Dr. Morales, James Chen. My son told me what your daughter said to him, about defending you, about integrity over image. He looked at Luna's triptych. He was right to apologize. I was right to tell him your story is an example our industry needs. Tyler stood next to his father, looking uncomfortable and humbled in equal measure. I'm sorry, he said directly to Luna, for what I said about your dad, about janitors. I was wrong. You were, Luna agreed. But you apologized. That matters. A teacher announced that student presentations would begin in 10 minutes. Luna took her place by her boards, and a crowd gathered 40-50 people, more than any other project in the gymnasium. She spoke clearly, confidently, like someone who'd inherited her father's quiet strength and her mother's fierce grace. She talked about invisible labor, about the people who kept cities running, buildings clean, children fed, about how dignity existed in all work, not just the work that came with corner offices and impressive titles. Then she turned to the triptych. This is my father, Ethan Morales. He used to be a professor. Then he was a janitor. Now he's a consultant who saves companies from making terrible mistakes. But in all three versions, he's been the same person. Smart, careful, brave in quiet ways. Her voice caught slightly. He taught me that worth isn't visible, that the most important work happens in the background, that love doesn't need volume and truth doesn't need a stage. The gymnasium was silent. People called him a whistleblower, Luna continued. They say he exposed fraud and saved a billion-dollar company. But that's not the whole truth. The whole truth is that he's a dad who worked 2 jobs to keep me safe after my mom died, who chose to do the right thing even when it was scary, who showed me that heroism looks like showing up, like reading carefully, like caring when it costs you something. She looked directly at Ethan. I'm proud of you, Dad. All 3 versions, but especially the one who's just my father. The applause started small, then built. People wiping eyes, teachers nodding, parents looking at their own kids with expressions that said, "Pay attention to this." Ava stepped forward. I'm Ava Liang, CEO of Helix Core Biogen, and I want to say publicly what I've said privately to Ethan. He didn't just save my company. He reminded us that expertise exists everywhere, that titles don't define worth, that the people we overlook might be exactly the people we need most. She looked around the gymnasium. We're implementing new protocols at Helix Core, not just contract review, but cultural change, respect for all workers, pathways for people to use their skills regardless of their job titles. Because if we'd been paying attention 3 years ago, Ethan wouldn't have had to work as a janitor to pay his bills. He would have been in the role he's in now, protecting us, teaching us, making us better. More applause. Someone shouted, "Hear, hear!" A local news camera invited by the school for showcase coverage swung toward Ava and Ethan. Ethan wanted to run, wanted to disappear. But Luna was watching him with such pride, such hope, that running felt like betrayal. So he stood, accepted the recognition, let himself be seen. After the presentations ended, after the awards were given, Luna's project won Most Impactful Social Commentary. After the crowd dispersed and the gymnasium emptied, Ethan and Luna walked to the car under the Seattle night sky. "You okay?" Luna asked. "Yeah, sunshine. I'm okay." "You got pretty visible back there." "I did." "Was it awful?" Ethan thought about it, about Ava's speech and Luna's presentation, and the faces in the crowd who'd looked at him not as a janitor or a whistleblower, but as a person who'd made difficult choices and survived them. No, it wasn't awful. It was honest. Good. Luna climbed into the car. Because I think honesty is what makes you brave. Not hiding, not showing off, just being honest about who you are and what you do. When did you get so wise? I had a good teacher. They drove home. Ordered pizza, pineapple, and olives for Luna, something reasonable for Ethan. Watched a documentary about wolves that Luna wanted for her next art project. And around 10 p.m., after Luna went to bed, Ethan did something he hadn't done in 3 years. He opened the closet in his bedroom, dug past old coats and boxes of Maria's things he couldn't quite throw away. Found the briefcase he'd used at the university leather, worn with his initials embossed on the front. Inside was his diploma, his faculty ID, a photo of him at a conference in Berlin, young and confident, and unaware that grief was waiting around the corner. And at the bottom, wrapped in tissue paper, was something Maria had given him during his first year teaching a nameplate. Brushed metal. Simple engraving, Dr. Ethan Morales. He'd never used it. Had meant to mount it on his office door at UW, but kept forgetting. Kept putting it off until the cancer came, and the world rearranged itself, and the nameplate went into a briefcase that went into a closet that became a tomb for the person he used to be. Ethan pulled it out now. Held it in both hands. The next Monday, he went to Helix Core early. Let himself into his storage room office. And he mounted the nameplate on the door, not facing outward where everyone could see it. Facing inward. A private reminder that he was both versions, the professor and the janitor, the expert and the invisible man, the person who'd lost everything, and the person who'd built something new from the ashes. Grace Ava's assistant walked by around 8:30, saw the nameplate, smiled. "Looks good, Dr. Morales." "Thanks, Grace. Coffee's fresh in the executive kitchen if you want some." "I'll grab a cup. Thanks." Word spread through the building in that mysterious way that workplace news always spread. By lunchtime, people were calling him Dr. Morales instead of Ethan. Not mockingly, not performatively, just respectfully. Mira stopped by his office around 2. "The team wants to do a training session. Deep dive into linguistic contract review. Would you be willing to teach?" "Yeah, I can do that." "Great. I'm thinking monthly seminars, small groups, your techniques, your frameworks. We'll pay you consulting rates on top of your contract review work." "You don't have to, Ethan." She cut him off gently. "This isn't charity. This is us investing in capability we desperately need. Let us pay you what you're worth." He agreed. Because she was right. Because worth had value. Because he'd spent 3 years accepting less than he deserved. And it was time to stop. The months that followed brought change that felt both seismic and natural. Helix Core implemented Ava's cultural reforms. Pay audits to ensure janitors and support staff were compensated fairly. Pathways for employees to transition into roles that used their full skills. A company-wide memo about respect and the value of essential work. Bryce Kincaid was officially terminated and barred from working in biotech partnerships in the U.S. Munich Genetische Forschung faced regulatory investigations in 3 countries. Klaus Brenner, whoever he really was, disappeared into the digital ether, leaving behind a trail of poisoned contracts and shattered partnerships. But those were the headlines, the visible changes. The invisible changes happened in break rooms and hallways, and quiet moments when people started actually seeing each other. When the executives learned the names of the cleaning crew. When the lawyers started asking the janitors about their lives, their dreams, their hidden expertise. Luna's art project toured 3 other schools in the district. A local gallery asked to display it. The Seattle Times did a feature, "Middle Schoolers Project Challenges Workplace Invisibility." Tyler and Luna became friends. Not close friends, he was still kind of a jerk, but friends enough that he stopped judging people by their job titles and started asking better questions. And Ethan kept working, kept reviewing contracts, kept teaching lawyers how to read the invisible traps in visible language, kept being the ghost in the machine who protected the company by seeing what others missed. But he wasn't invisible anymore, not to Helix Core, not to the industry, not to himself. 6 months after the Munich deal collapsed, Ava called him into her office for a conversation that felt different from their usual contract discussions. "I've been thinking," she said, pouring coffee for both of them, "about structure, about titles, about what it means to work in the shadows versus working with autonomy." "Okay? Your consulting arrangement is working. You're happy. We're protected. But Ethan, you've trained half my legal team. You're reviewing deals worth hundreds of millions. You're the primary reason we haven't walked into another Munich situation. That's not consultant work anymore. That's leadership." Ethan set down his coffee. "I don't want to be a leader. I told you. I know what you told me. Stay invisible. No publicity. Protect Luna." Ava leaned forward. "But Luna's project just toured the school district. She's already visible. And you stood up at that showcase and let yourself be seen. So the question isn't whether you can stay invisible. The question is what kind of visible you want to be. What are you proposing? VP of Linguistic Risk and Contract Integrity. Actual title. Actual office. Actual team reporting to you. Not public-facing unless you want to be. Not customer-facing unless necessary. Just you doing what you do, but with the resources and authority to do it at scale. Ethan stared at her. VP. Your expertise is worth it. Your impact is worth it. You are worth it. She slid a folder across the desk. Salary equity package benefits. Take the weekend. Think about it. Talk to Luna. But Ethan, stop punishing yourself for surviving Maria's death. Stop hiding your worth because you think you don't deserve it. You do, and it's time you believed it. He took the folder home, showed it to Luna over dinner. She read through the proposal, her 12-year-old brain processing numbers and titles and implications. Then she looked up. Do you want it? I don't know. That's not true. You know, you're just scared. Yeah. Luna set down the folder. Mom would want you to take it. She'd say you worked too hard to rebuild yourself just to keep living small. She'd say growth looks like accepting what you've earned. You sound like her. Good. Someone has to remind you that you're allowed to be happy. She smiled. Take the job, Dad. Be the VP. Own it. I'll be fine. We'll be fine. And Tyler's face when he finds out will be priceless. Ethan laughed, cried a little, hugged his daughter, and thought about Maria and grief and the strange mathematics of loss that sometimes, against all odds, added up to something like hope. He took the job. The announcement went out on a Monday. Internal first, then a measured press release about Helix Corps' new VP of Linguistic Risk and Contract Integrity. No dramatic narrative, no whistleblower story, just a simple acknowledgement that Dr. Ethan Morales, a specialist in multilingual risk assessment, had joined the executive team. The reactions were mixed. Some industry people questioned his qualifications. Others pointed to the Munich case as proof he knew what he was doing. A few competitors tried to poach him with offers of even bigger titles and salaries. Ethan turned them all down. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about being in the right place, doing the right work with people who saw him fully and valued him completely. His office was on the 41st floor, corner space with a view of Elliott Bay. He kept the old nameplate from his storage room and mounted it inside where only he could see it. A reminder of where he'd been, of the journey from invisible to essential. On his first day in the new role, Ava stopped by with champagne and 2 glasses. To quiet revolutions, she said, pouring. To being seen, Ethan countered. They drank to both, and that night at home, Ethan did something he hadn't done since Maria died. He pulled out the box of her things from the back of the closet. Her journals, her photos. The letter she'd written him during her last week. Don't let grief make you small. Live big enough for both of us. Love Luna. Love yourself. Love the future we don't get to share, but you still get to build. He cried. Luna cried with him. They looked through photos and told stories and remembered the woman who'd taught them both that love was a verb, not a feeling, and that courage looked like doing the next right thing, even when your heart was broken. We should frame some of these, Luna said, holding a picture of Maria laughing at the ocean. Put them up, not hidden. Just here. Part of our life. Yeah, Ethan agreed. We should. They spent the evening choosing photos, hung them in the living room, created a visible reminder that Maria was gone, but not forgotten, that grief and joy could coexist, that families were built from love and loss in equal measure. The final piece went above the kitchen table. Maria, Ethan, and baby Luna. All 3 of them laughing at something long forgotten, but forever preserved. Perfect and imperfect and real. Ethan stood back, looking at the collection of memories now visible on their walls, and felt something shift. Not closure. He'd never have closure. But acceptance. Integration. The understanding that he could be both the person who'd lost everything and the person who'd built something new. That night before bed, Luna showed him her latest project. Not for school. Personal. A painting of their apartment with all the photos visible on the walls, all the memories acknowledged, all the love made concrete. "It's us," she said. "All of us, including the parts we used to hide. It's beautiful sunshine. So are we, Dad. So are we." And standing there in their small apartment with their visible memories and their hard-won peace, Ethan realized she was right. They were beautiful. Not in spite of the pain, but because of what they'd done with it. The ways they'd survived. The quiet courage of showing up every day and choosing to build something from the ruins. The story could have ended there, tidy, complete, wrapped in sentiment. But life wasn't tidy. Life was messy and complicated, and full of moments that mattered precisely because they weren't perfect. So the real ending came 3 months later at the company-wide town hall, where Ava announced Helix Core's new partnership model contracts, vetted through Ethan's team linguistic integrity as standard practice, dignity, and respect embedded in every agreement. "We learned something important this year," Ava told the assembled employees. "That expertise exists everywhere, that worth isn't defined by titles, that the people we overlook might be exactly the people we need most, and we have one man to thank for teaching us that lesson." She called Ethan to the stage. He walked up, heart-pounding, Luna's words in his head. "Honesty is what makes you brave." "I'm not a hero," he said to the room full of faces. Some he knew, some he didn't. All of them paying attention. "I'm a father who did his job, who read carefully, who spoke up when staying silent would have been easier. That's not heroism. That's basic decency. And if we build a company, if we build a world where basic decency looks heroic, we've set the bar too low." He paused, gathered courage. "I was invisible for 3 years, by choice, by circumstance, by the mathematics of grief and debt and trying to survive. And I learned something in that invisibility. I learned that the most essential work happens in the background, that quiet doesn't mean absent, that the people who keep things running, janitors, drivers, teachers, caregivers, they deserve more than our occasional recognition. They deserve our constant respect." The room was silent, listening. "So here's my challenge to all of us," Ethan continued. "See the invisible. Ask questions. Learn names. Acknowledge the work that happens when nobody's watching. Because that's the work that matters. That's the work that saves us. And the people doing it, they're not looking for applause. They're looking for dignity. Let's give it to them." The applause, when he finished, wasn't polite, corporate clapping. It was real. Sustained. The kind that came from people who'd heard something true and felt it land. Ethan stepped off the stage and found Luna waiting. She'd skipped school for this, with permission, and she hugged him fiercely. "You were perfect," she whispered. "I was honest." "Same thing." They drove home together, the Seattle afternoon gray and beautiful and exactly where they belonged. And that night over dinner, Luna asked the question Ethan had been dreading and hoping for in equal measure. "Do you think Mom would be proud?" "Yeah, sunshine. I think she'd be proud." "Of both of us. Of both of us." Luna smiled, then asked, "What do you think she'd say if she could see us now?" Ethan thought about it. About Maria's letters, and her love, and her fierce insistence that life was meant to be lived fully, even when it hurt. "I think she'd say we did good, that we survived the unsurvivable, that we found ways to matter, that we didn't let grief make us small. And that it's okay to be happy, to accept good things, to believe we deserve the life we've built. Luna reached across the table, took his hand. I think she'd be right. Yeah, Ethan agreed. I think she would. And there in their small apartment with its visible memories and its hard-won peace, with the Seattle night settling over the city and the future, spreading out like an unwritten contract full of possibility and risk in equal measure, Ethan Morales finally allowed himself to believe something he'd forgotten during the dark years, that worth didn't need volume, that truth didn't need a stage, and that quiet courage, the kind that showed up every day and did the work that mattered, was the most essential kind of all. The nameplate stayed on his office door. The photos stayed on their walls. And the story, the real story, not the headline version, belonged to them. Father and daughter. Visible and valued, and exactly where they were meant to be. The end was just a beginning, wearing different clothes. And that Ethan thought was exactly how it should be.